You're listening to Three Things to Know with Stephanie Haney. The people you want to hear from and the things you need to know in Northeast Ohio and beyond. Get in the know, stay in the know. Starting right now.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Three Things to Know podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Haney. Today, we've got a very taboo topic that we'll be discussing, something that I don't think should be taboo, but in a lot of circles it is. I'm talking about your money. I want to talk about your money. I want to talk about my money. I want to talk about how to get financially healthy. What does that mean to be financially healthy? Well, when we're talking about your financial health, we're talking about what do you have in savings? We're talking about the touchy subject of how much debt you have. Also, how much you spend compared to what you make. And here's a big one. How much you're putting away for retirement, because I know that we all love our jobs. We all love our jobs, right? Yes, we love our jobs, but we don't want to work forever. We want to be able to spend our golden years in a cabin in the mountains or under a palm tree on a beach or just wherever you are right now, but just not being a slave to a schedule and all of that good stuff, right? So this is something that we need to think about. And while we're talking about this, we'll take a look at what you need to know in order to determine if you are financially healthy, and some important words to know, because the terminology can be tricky when it comes to financial health. It really is a language of its own. And also how to make your money work for you, whether you've got an extra $1, an extra $20, a bunch of extra money every paycheck. And we're going to talk about the hottest new investment app right now, that Robinhood app, which you may have heard some things about. You might have heard some not so good things about it in the headlines, but a lot of people seem to be pretty happy with it. So we'll talk about that. And to get us in the know on this topic, we'll be talking with Elizabeth Scheiderer. She's a certified financial planner and a senior financial advisor with NCA Financial Planners, which is right here in Northeast Ohio in Mayfield Heights. Also, she was one of Crane's 40 Under 40 in 2017. So decorated in her field, lots of insight to share with us, and I'm going to bring her in right now. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us on the Three Things to Know podcast.
Perfect. Happy to be here.
Financial health is something that can honestly fall by the wayside if we're not paying attention to it. So very happy to have you here to get us all hooked up and in the know about what we need to know to make sure we're taking care of that part of our lives. So my first question for you is, what should the average person be taking stock of when it comes to their financial health?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think the first place to start is your cash flow. The biggest question you need to ask yourself, are you spending less than you make? That's really kind of that first pulse on, are we heading towards a not so healthy path, or are we on the right track and not adding to credit cards?
How do you take stock of your credit situation specifically? What's a good way to keep an eye on that?
Yeah, so the best way to get started is to put it on paper. You want to sit down and say, this is what I have. It's almost like creating a balance sheet. It doesn't have to be like a corporation's, but you want to get an idea of, this is how much I have in savings and this is how much I have in debt. And you just want to write it down and get it on paper. So when you do that, you want to say, this is how much I owe on that debt. This is the interest rate I'm paying on that debt. And this is my monthly payment. And that really just starts to outline kind of the pulse of where you're at there.
I am a huge fan of a spreadsheet, so I love that you said that. I am a spreadsheet nerd. Give me a Google Doc and a spreadsheet and I'll just be content for longer than I would like to admit, to be quite honest. What's so great though is that we do have access with our online accounts to these summaries where we can quickly pull up that information. That's such a useful tool, don't you think?
Oh, most certainly. My biggest thing to get electronically delivered these days is my year-end credit card summary. Where did we spend money? Was there changes from the year before? Oh, now we have a baby. Look at what we're spending over here. And so it's someone else already doing all the spreadsheet work, but you get a nice consolidated summary, and it's a nice way to kind of look at where you have been spending. That's for sure.
Do you have any tips for helping people keep an eye out for things that are maybe unexpected coming up? What are some of those maybe annual expenses that we don't keep in the forefront of our mind all the time?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one that I see most often is having to do with insurance, like your car insurance. Maybe you don't pay that every month, you pay it once a year. Same with maybe life insurance is another one. So more on the insurance side is where I tend to see those most often surprising big time expenses. But that's kind of why we get to this idea of spending less than you make is really the true kind of test, because you need to have an emergency fund. That's one of those pieces that you can't ignore when you're doing your financial checkup. Do you have enough in savings if you have a car accident and need to make some repairs? What's your deductible on your auto insurance? Is it $150 or is it $500? So if it's $500, you better have $500 ready in case there's an issue. So those sort of things come into play, but big surprise items tend to be actually related around insurance is what I tend to see.
It can be very tricky. I know my health insurance premiums personally are due every 3 months, and I can be paying attention to what I'm spending and think I'm in pretty good shape based on a certain month if it's not that month where I have that payment to make. So that is something that's been helpful for me when it comes to the spreadsheet. I see that sort of red box where I've got that health insurance premium sort of reminder right there. When you talk about the balance sheets, what are some of the things that we should be including on our balance sheet to keep stock?
Yeah. So first thing on the asset side is think about, what do you have in your checking account? What do you have in a savings account if you have one? Your work retirement plan, and then really any other investments you might have. If you've got college savings for your kids, really anywhere that's, set to be either growing in the stock market or just, checking savings accounts would be on the asset side. And then on the liability side is where we see those student loans, we see the mortgage, we see, car loans, those sort of things. And so they, especially when you're younger, they're not going to line up. You're going to have a lot more liabilities than you have assets. This whole point of this checkup is just to know where you stand. I mean, that's the power. And then you can start to see trends.
Knowledge is definitely power. And there are a lot of tools also when it comes to the credit score. How important is that in our annual checkup?
Yeah, so it's definitely needs to be added to this annual checkup. Now, you're able to get a free credit score every year through annualcreditreport.com. It's a government-run site, and you're traditionally able to pull it 3 times a year, but during COVID times, they've actually made it weekly. You're able to look at your credit report. It's different than the actual number. It's going to just show you, what liabilities are outstanding and do you have any late payments. If you actually want to get your credit score, some credit cards have that now associated with them, the actual number. It's also good practice where if, let's say, you are in the market for a new car and they run a credit score for you to see what kind of interest rate you'd get on that car loan, just ask them for the number. That's another way to just kind of peek at it. So
knowledge is definitely power. Now, I know that we're talking about this in terms of an annual checkup, but is that really enough? How often should we really be looking at these things?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in at least twice a year. Not everyone loves spreadsheets like we do. And so sometimes it takes a giant bottle of wine and a sitting down together to kind of look at all this. And so again, we're looking for trends in this checkup. And then, if you need to kind of dive in deeper to any sort of area. And so big believer in twice a year. And actually this time of year is a good time to do that first one, in my opinion, because you're already getting prepared to get ready to file your taxes. Mm-hmm. So, receiving your W-2 or your 1099, what was your income last year? You'll be getting information on how your investments have done, that year-end credit card summary we just talked about, all those items. And so you already have to get organized. So you might as well take it and run with it. And then it frees you up for this in the summer to go ahead and look at it again. It's a little quieter. You can look for some changes too. How much did you really spend on vacations this year? Was your budget in line? Is tuition for the kids, is that going up, or daycare expenses going up in the new school year? It's a good time to get ready. And also, get ready for the holidays. If you start planning ahead earlier in the year, you're not going to be dealing with feelings of, buyer's remorse and credit card debt come January each year. So.
And that's an interesting thing. I think that's probably something, me personally, I think a lot of people can probably relate to this. I do set a budget. I do. going back and actually checking and see if I did stick to that budget is not something that I've really made a prominent point when it comes to my financial health. And I could see how that would be really beneficial, kind of knowing where you're prone to maybe fudge the line a little bit.
Exactly. And then it helps you kind of make some different decisions. If you're spending more, taking yoga classes, well, maybe then you should do that annual membership if it makes more sense than paying as you go. So those are some of the things you start to see when you look at that budget, twice a year, that spending plan. And it's not black and white, it's gray, it's flexible. Some things change, unexpected things come up and you got to adjust, but it's always a good kind of roadmap to follow, at least to get started.
And what a good conversation starter too, by the way. Of course, let me preface this by saying that all kinds of partnerships have their own things that work for them. But if you are sharing finances with someone, that kind of those W-2s rolling in, those 1099s rolling in, that might be a good jumping off point to have a conversation and see, if you two are aligned in what's happening.
Exactly. It's, maybe you've got a goal of, yes, we want to, get a new house in 3 years. Well, how are we towards that track? It helps framework. Well, should we take that vacation to go see grandma, or do we need to save those monies for the house? And it changes, discussions from maybe potentially a fight to more of a, are we working towards our same financial goals and making sure you're on that same page? So it is a good way to get together, and especially too, and again, as you shared, every relationship is different, but if you have one partner that tends to be the lead financial partner, it's an opportunity for that other partner to come in and really kind of see where you stand, because also, if something ever were to happen to you, if you were the lead partner, it at least gives that other person kind of an idea of what the situation looks like. So another positive to these checkups, it's making sure everybody's at least aware of the health of your family. So
and talking about that awareness, and especially in a situation if maybe you are in some kind of a partnership, one person's more of the lead than you are, it can be intimidating to talk about finances in general, just because the terminology can be intimidating. Can you clue us in on some of the terms that we just absolutely need to know if we're taking stock of our financial health?
Yeah, and so some of the terms, I've mentioned today that I think are important is the first one that comes to mind is an interest rate. How much are you making on your savings? How much is the bank paying you? And then also how much is your credit card company charging you in an interest rate? Or how much is the interest rate on your mortgage? And this really helps you kind of know when opportunities can arise. So this idea of, a 0% credit card offer for a period of time. Well, what does that look like? Or should I be refinancing my house? If you know your current mortgage rate right away and you see what's out there, it can help you make some decisions. So I think interest rates is really kind of an area where we can tend to be a little bit more nimble or tactical if we know those numbers and then where things are out in the market. And then, another one is just this ideas of stock and bonds, right? This financial health checkup is great for cash flow and budgeting, but it's also looking at, are you on track for retirement? And we really can't get to retirement without investing in stocks and in bonds inside of the stock market. And so, big picture, stocks are more aggressive, bonds tend to be more conservative. There's different risks associated with them. And so together, those, types of investments, stocks or bonds, can be, included in what's called a mutual fund. And so really what I want to, share here today is this idea of a target date fund, because most of us have access to target date funds inside of our work retirement plans or inside of our kids' college funds. And so these target date funds are a mixture of stock and bonds positions that are designed to get more conservative as that date approaches. So for many of us that just maybe know big picture what a stock and a bond is, and that's all you care to know, those target date funds are really what I wanted to share is a pretty decent solution if you don't want to get into the weeds when it comes to investing.
And we talked a little bit about credit score already, but what else can you share with us a little bit more in detail that people really need to know about that?
Yeah, so credit scores are really comprised of a few components, and the main, about 5 components, things like credit history, what's the, how much are you using your credit card, and how many cards do you have open, those sort of things. And so, one of the best rules of thumb, if you can do this to help your credit score, is to just utilize about 30 to 40% of what your credit card balance gives you. So if you have access to $1,000 on your credit card, ideally to best help your credit score, it's great to have $300 to $400 a month of expenses on there and then pay it off every month. So paying those, bills on time and then not fully maxing out your credit cards is really how we help our credit score.
Keeping those balances low. And also, is this a factor, the length of time that you've had accounts? Does that also play into your credit score or not?
It does. It does. So the longer you've had access to credit, the better it is on your report. And so this is also can kind of tie into financial checkups as your kids are getting older. And should they start to have access to a prepaid credit score to work on their credit history when they, get that first job and things like that. So not only are you doing a checkup on yourself, but also kind of starts to think of some things when it comes to your family as well.
All these little tips just to keep in mind. Speaking of young people, not necessarily children, but, just made me think of this. If you have just very limited discretionary money, is this still something you can be thinking about? How can you make your money work for you if you have just not a lot of stuff to play with, if you're just trying to get by?
Yeah, no, great question. And so step one is to really make certain your expenses are less than your income, even if it's just like $20. Right? You don't want to be getting into a situation where you have credit card debt that's going to be pulling you down and kind of something you need to get out of. But if you do have that credit card debt, it's coming up with a payment plan that's going to get it paid off. So then you can start to have some more flexibility and some more fun. It doesn't have to be forever. It may just be a year of not doing much and getting those credit cards paid down, but it's definitely a choice. And talk about financial freedom when that's over. So, big believer in, also making it automatic, even with that extra $20, can you automatically put that in your savings account every month? And then you can also try to make it fun. There's some, tips and tricks out there. One of the fun ideas is to save $1 every week. So $1 the first week, then $2 the second week, $3 the third week, or you could reverse it and do the 52, then 51, and then the 50. And then in that situation, by the end of the entire year, you would have had $1,378. So
that's a lot of money.
That is. That's a nice trip. It's all your holiday spending and then some. I mean, it's really what you want to do. And so just saying, it's my $1 week, it's my $2 week, or even, every week I'm going to take the remaining $2 out of my account, and put it into my savings. So make it fun and then find someone to keep you accountable. Hey, it's week 24. Did you put $24 in your savings? And it kind of adds to it makes it more of an adventure, I guess, with someone else than just solo. So.
Absolutely. I can see that. And I love the idea about making it automatic, because if you don't see the money, you're not going to miss it. That's something that I've definitely subscribed to. But with that savings per week thing, that's kind of the opposite thing. Maybe I know a lot of us don't necessarily have cash on hand, but if you did, and if you made it sort of a physical activity, go to the ATM, get that money, break up the change, keep it in your wallet, and maybe have a jar where you stuff that money in and see that savings grow. That would be sort of the opposite thing, having that visual of that money growing. Geez, how nice would that be?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I mean, even if you get a little thermometer that you draw and put it on your mirror every morning and you kind of watch it grow over the year, that's exactly what you want to do.
So, oh my gosh. And sharing that kind of thing on social media, people would love that. People would be cheering you on and all that good stuff. And that's another way, social media, is what it is. It's got its pros and cons, but it is a good way for us to keep each other accountable sometimes.
Exactly. I know. People are trying to lose weight all the time. Let's try to save some money. So.
Now, we've talked about all these ways that we can keep an eye on making sure our financial health is going in the right direction. What are some red flags that when we see them, when we're doing this checkup, we really need to sort of alert ourselves and be like, not the way we want to be going?
Yeah, so a few points here on this one with the red flags is, the first would be if your credit card balances just keep growing. You're heading down a path that isn't going to work. It just isn't. And so you need to say, okay, I need to fix this and figure out a way to move on. So that's kind of the biggest red flag. And the second red flag is a little different in my mind, but it's if you're investing and saving for your retirement and other, goals, if you're starting to feel like you're gambling and not necessarily investing, that would be a concern of mine. There's a difference between being a day trader and being a long-term investor. Yes, it's fun to see what Apple stock is doing today and how much money you made or didn't make, but also recognizing that there's, you need to also think long-term and stay diversified when it comes to retirement. And so if you're starting to get more of an adrenaline high with the investing, and especially, the last few months, the market's really gone up, be careful. It is an emotional game, and be aware of what your investments are, and how you're feeling with them would be another kind of red flag I'd want to bring up is, yes, investing is fun, but it's also, not gambling. And so you need to be prudent with your money for at least the long-term retirement spending. If you just want to see what you can do with a few $100s, that's another thing. So.
And you had mentioned already too, trying to be on the same page with people. How do we avoid getting to that situation where it turns into a fight? Any tips for us there?
Yeah, I think coming up with a number, right? What's the number each of you can spend every month or every 6 months if you're meeting over that time period that's just yours to spend? It's helpful. I can be guilt-free getting my nails done, and I just know that that's what my cash flow is, and I don't have to listen to what my partner has to say to that because it's my choice. So that's really where I've seen a lot of partners have success, is coming up with a number. And, if my partner wants to spend it all on getting lunches at work and I want to spend mine at the salon, hey, that's fine, because we're still working towards that next house, retirement, college savings, all that goodness. And that's a number that can be adjusted, especially if someone gets a raise at work or there's an inheritance, things like that.
There's one more word that I want to talk about, which I think can be very important here. That's fiduciary. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So if you're working with someone to help manage your portfolio and your financial plan, you want to make certain you're working with a fiduciary. There's been some regulation changes over the last year, all for the good. That's really more helping investors better understand who their advisor is and how they're paid and all that really important stuff. But looking for a certified financial planner, a fiduciary, making certain someone's going to put your interest ahead of their own is really what a fiduciary is. And so you want that transparency, all that goodness. And, if there is some fighting between you and your partner, it might be helpful to bring in a third party. And that would be one of the questions to ask. And I'd recommend at least talking to one or two, at least 2 or 3 people, because you need to find the right fit.
And the whole point of that fiduciary label, that whole title, just from a legal perspective, is then that person has a legal obligation to put your financial interests in the best possible light, right?
Exactly. Yep. And be transparent along the way. I mean, this is where we need to go with helping people with investing and financial planning and all that really important stuff. It's all goodness. It really is. So.
So we're talking about making this accessible to people, and there has been one particular app that is getting a lot of buzz right now. It's this Robinhood investment app. Elizabeth, what do you think about the Robinhood app?
Yeah, so just kind of big picture, what I like about the Robinhood app is it kind of opens people's eyes to investing. It does kind of start with that kind of day trader mentality, right? I'm going to be buying and trading stocks on a daily basis is really kind of how the app has been promoted. Not necessarily long-term investing, which as a certified financial planner, I tend to lean that way, but it was great. It gets people investing and learning about the stock market and kind of feeling the ups and downs and really how, they manage those feelings for the market. So that's great. They have had some negative publicity here lately, and, it's just kind of, if it sounds too good to be true, sometimes it is. And so just keeping that in mind, especially just as you're looking at different sort of investment tools, is, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So.
That's exactly right. Yes, the headlines that you're talking about, at least one of them was Robinhood had to pay a settlement because there maybe was a little bit of lack in transparency in how the app was actually making money. The company came out and said that that was related to prior practices, but regardless, I'll link an article about that in the show notes so that everybody can get informed on that. Do your own research, of course. Very, very important. Elizabeth, do you have any other parting tips for us while we're trying to get our finances in good shape?
Yeah, I guess one other tip is just, we mentioned a lot, focus a lot, I think, on more of younger families. But two, as you get closer to retirement, this becomes even more important. The analogy of, you've been storing up for winter and putting all your acorns away, and it's going to come and you're going to need to eat those acorns. And so kind of thinking about, your budget and spending and how you're going to spend your retirement time, and what does your social security statement look like, kind of bringing in some newer items to that equation. So again, really looking at what your retirement cash flow might be is something I'd suggest as you kind of hit 50, and then kind of keep looking at that. So,
and all of those things, I'm sure, so many major life milestones that change your financial plan. And that's the thing, things change over time. They just do.
No, and that's the best part about financial planning is it's flexible, and there's no real right or wrong answer. Everyone's philosophies and different objectives can be accomplished and taken into account. It's just, which way do you want to climb the mountain and how do you want to get there? So
thank you so much for your time and these tips, Elizabeth. Where can people connect with you if they'd like to learn more?
Yeah, so the website is www.ncafinancial.com, and we're at 6095 Parkland Boulevard, Suite 210 in Mayfield Heights, Ohio, 44124.
All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
That was great. Elizabeth definitely gave us lots of big overview things to think about, and just, I think, really set the groundwork for us to really think about whether we're financially healthy. And one thing that she talked about, again, was making sure that you're not spending more than you're bringing in. So right now, I just want to talk about a few easy ways that you can trim the fat, if you will. Here's one. Check those streaming services. I know that we're all spending a lot of time at home right now and we want to be entertained. Maybe now is the time to think about if we need to have all of those streaming services, because there's a lot of overlap between them. I know I probably have 1 or 2 or 7 more than I probably need to have. So it's a good time to think about how many you really need. Another thing to take a look at, subscriptions on your smartphone. If you have a smartphone and you're subscribed to apps and you're getting those recurring fees, $1.99 here, $1.99 there. I know these sound like small numbers, but these things can absolutely add up. Here's a little tip. I know I already mentioned that I love a good spreadsheet. Well, I recently went through my bank account just 1 month, 2 months, to see what comes over from 1 month to the next. And I made a list of all of my recurring charges. There were definitely things on there that I can cut out. And if you're someone who thinks that idea sounds interesting, where you save $1 this week, you save $2 the second week, $3 the third week. If you cut out some of those subscriptions, that's your savings right there if you want to cut out some of those things that you're just not using anyway. So just being mindful, I think, is really helpful when it comes to being financially healthy, and that's what this is all about. All right, while we're on the topic of being financially responsible, it's time to talk about what you need to know in NEO. And our investigative reporter, Rachel Polansky, has the inside scoop for us, of course, on a great hidden gem that doesn't cost a thing. Let's bring in Rachel now. Rachel, thank you for being here today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Now, I know you have been out and about in nature, and that's something that you really love. So you have a very fiscally responsible little hidden gem for us today, I understand?
Yes, that's true. So since I came to Northeast Ohio, which is a little over a year, my husband and I have been exploring all of the great hiking trails that the area has to offer. And while we love the metro parks and we love Cuyahoga Valley National Park, I'm going to be talking about a hidden gem today that we discovered out in Geauga County.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a hike for some folks, but definitely well worth it. The hike is Ansel's Cave, and it's out in the Westwoods in Geauga County.
How did you happen upon Ansel's Cave?
So we use this app called All Trails. It's a great app, and I don't have any affiliation with them. I use it though. I'll type in like what I'm looking for in a hike, waterfalls or a cave or this or that, and then how close to your location, distance, all of that. You can kind of highlight what you want, and then it tells you about different trails in the area. So that's how we found Ansel's Cave, because we had highlighted waterfalls and caves. And it's a really cool spot, and it's a 1.5 mile loop. So great for beginners or adventurers. There's also a bunch of trails around there. So after you complete the 1.5 mile loop, if you want, you can continue on some other trails around there, which is what we did. Because the West Woods is beautiful. That's out there, and there's a lot of areas to explore. But yeah, so Ansel's Cave, you start, if you put in your GPS, the West Woods, that parking lot next to the visitor center is where you go. Follow the signs for Ansel Cave Trail or Ansel Cave Loop, and it's super simple and easy to navigate. And it's really cool as you're walking along. There's these cliffs of, I think it was like Sharon Conglomerate it's called, but these beautiful cliffs that you can see and ledges, and eventually you'll end up on this small boardwalk that overlooks the cave. And you're not allowed to go inside the cave. You have to stay on the trail. Okay. But it's still well worth it. You can really see it great from the trail, and it's a really neat spot.
Well, that sounds absolutely beautiful, and it's great that you have options once you get there too. So depending on your experience level, like you said, you can keep going if you want to, or you can just stick to that mile loop. And you sent me the address here, so I'm going to share that with people now. It's 9465 Kinsman Road in Novelty, Ohio. Sounds like it just cost you a little bit of gas to get out there. Or maybe if you're already in Geauga, not much at all.
Yeah, exactly. And when we were there, the visitor center was closed. So I'm not sure how that might have changed with COVID protocol. But even if the visitor center is closed, you can still, walk around the trails. And it was nice. We had it all to ourselves, which is always fun as well.
That is nice. That's kind of what you want when you go out into nature, right? You want to have something be a little bit more secluded for you.
Exactly.
And I have heard good things about that All Trails app as well. Of course, yes, no affiliation, but a very good friend of mine who I often go hiking with, whose name is also Stephanie, she uses that app, and I have sort of just been kind of piggybacking on her using the app, and now I get to piggyback on you using the app and find out where all the good spots are.
Yeah, it's great. And another thing that's really cool about it is I like to download the trail ahead of time. So in case you lose Wi-Fi, some trails are, really off the beaten path. You still have the map. So even if you somehow get off the trail, you can get back on with the map.
That is a perfect tip, because in my limited hiking experience here in Northeast Ohio, after also having recently just moved back, that's happened to me out on the hiking trails, no Wi-Fi, and then I'm, taking pictures of things along the way. That is a true story. That has happened. Yes, don't judge me.
It's easy to get spun around, and everything looks the same. So yeah, it's a good little tip.
That is a good one. Well, thank you for that, Rachel. That is the perfect need to know in NEO, and moving out in spreading our horizons to Geauga. Now, normally this would be where I say goodbye to you, but we're doing things a little bit differently this week, and it's now time to share a good follow on social media. And we're keeping Rachel with us because she's got a great recommendation for us. This is actually something that came up in the conversation with the financial planner that I was talking with. She specifically mentioned yoga. So Rachel, what do you have for us in the yoga world for our good follow?
Oh, I love that. I'm glad she brought it up. I am such a yoga enthusiast. I started doing yoga myself a few years ago, and I swear it has saved my life. Like, from, great workout to great spiritual feelings, and just, especially if you have a stressful job like ours, it's just a great little escape. And so I'm going to share one of my favorite instructors in Northeast Ohio. Her name is Marni, and I met her. I do a hot yoga at Cleveland Yoga Studio, which, that does cost money, but Marni does some free classes on her Facebook and on her Instagram, and she is just a great follow for just good little inspirational notes and things like that. She's one of those follows on Instagram that anytime you see she posts something, you look at it and it'll make you smile, or think about something, a nice quote of inspiration. And her workouts are great. If you're looking for that like quick, that sweaty workout that like gets your heart racing, she does that. But then she also has the cool down and the nice spiritual journey to enlightenment, if you will, and in yoga vibes. Always leaves you feeling in a good mood and ready to take on the day.
Well, that sounds perfect. So now we have to ask you, what is her Instagram handle?
Yes, so it's Marni.task. So that's MARNI .T like Tom ASK.
Okay, and then also on Facebook, you said?
Yeah, and her Facebook is just Marni Task Yoga.
All right. So if you want to get into the yoga thing, if you want to sort of dip your toe into it, and also if you're budgeting and trying to be financially responsible and you want to take some of these free classes from Marni, that's where you can do it. That sounds like an exceptionally good follow for us this week. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, and just to like piggyback off of that too, during COVID-19, she was saying it's forced her to do a lot of teaching virtually. But I think for beginners, I know some people are intimidated to go to a yoga studio and just jump right in. So for a beginner, I think it'd be great because you can be in your room, no one can see you, and you can follow along. And she does beginner classes. So if you do get into yoga and eventually you want to go to the studio, great way to, just dip your toe in and see if you like it.
Perfect. All right. I'm not letting you go, Rachel, before you tell people where they can follow you so they can get all your great stories and your investigative stuff for 3 News.
Yes, thank you. I am Rachel Polansky, and I'm on all the platforms. On Instagram, I'm just Rachel Polansky News. On Facebook, Rachel Polansky. And on Twitter, R Polansky News. So I'm very active. I'm all over the place.
Yes, and we'll have all of that, of course, linked in the show notes, so you'll be able to connect with Rachel and also Marni, and also find that great secret that Rachel shared with us out for the good hike at Ansel's Cave in Geauga. Thanks for being with us today, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And that's going to do it for us this week on the 3 Things to Know podcast. If you like what you're hearing so far, please subscribe and leave me a rating and a review. I would love to know what you're thinking about. Also, send me a DM. _Stephanie Haney is where you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I would love to know what you want to hear about so that we can get that scheduled in and get you in the know on whatever it is that you would like to talk about on a little bit of a deeper dive than you might normally be able to get to, because this is a podcast and that's the beauty of it. We can have those longer conversations. Make sure you come back next week. Our conversation next week will be a 2-parter. We'll be talking with a Republican and a Democrat about what a Joe Biden presidency means for us here in Ohio, and you definitely will not want to miss it. We're going to get into all the things that we expect to change, the things that we expect to stay the same, and the things that we just don't know about. So I hope you'll join me for that. Thanks very much for being here, everybody. I'm Stephanie Haney.
Thanks for listening to 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney from WKYC Studios. Subscribe now to stay in the know.